Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And now we got the second of the year-end list. The top 10 best hit songs of 2022. If I thought 2022 was difficult to put in context for the worst hits of the year, the best feels like it's on a different level of weirdness. Now, some of this is based on the same limited selection of songs that come with the influx of Christmas music and cuts from 2021 that are taking up space on that year-end Hot 100, but I'd actually argue it runs further. For one, given the weirder cutoff timing, there are songs on this list from late 2021 that might seem a bit more appropriate left in that year, even if they only notched the year-end list this year. And we can't ignore songs that aren't even from this year becoming hits thanks to newfound virality. And my possibly contentious opinion that as long as they are eligible and that they have not made a year-end list for Billboard before, they are eligible. They always have been. Even if it might seem kind of unfair to pit a classic against what we have right now, which could well become a classic in the future. You never know. But again, what do we actually have right now? The pop-punk resurgence of last year seemed to evaporate, along with a majority of good pop and any traces of rock, and that's not even to get into trap or rap music, which hit the weird quagmire of album bombs that just shredded the momentum, and songs that really should have had a lot more staying power, just never crossing over properly because apparently we need another Encanto song to gum up the radio. I mean, you could argue that reggaeton had a really good year, but let's be real, that's more Bad Bunny having a lot of persistent success than anyone else, and we will get to him later. Hell, the genre that I would argue ran the goddamn table in 2022, it's country, where I haven't seen a year this strong mainstream or indie since probably the early 90s. A lot of chart nerds tend not to be aware of that golden era with the revival of neo-traditional country, thanks to the Hot 100 being a more of a pop songs chart, and crossover country was rarely recognized until later that decade for a lot of stupid reasons. But if you were not paying attention to Nashville this year, even with my well-known biases for this genre, you missed out on a lot. There's a lot of country on this list. You've been forewarned. But as per usual, the songs had to debut on the year-end Hot 100 in 2022. It does give me slightly less to choose from, and yes, I'm plenty annoyed that we'll have to save Taylor Swift for next year, but I did find plenty enough to flesh out this list, and I actually did have to make some cuts, which ultimately means I do not consider this as bad of a year as some have made it out to be. And you know what? We're going to start our honorable mentions with a bit of a curveball.
Me la voy a llevar a todas pa' un VIP, ey. Saluden a Titi, vamos a tirarnos un selfie. Say cheese, ey. Que sonrían las que ya les metí.
So for those who forgot from earlier this year, I did not exactly love Bad Bunny's new album. It was bloated. He dragged with him a lot of guest stars who were kind of hit and miss. And ultimately my favorites from the album, they didn't really last on the charts in the same way. Those were slightly more experimental deep cuts. Hell, even I'm a little bit surprised that this is the song that stuck around the most for me. It's Bad Bunny in pure braggadocious club mode, all sneering attitude as he rattles off of the names of the women that he's sleeping with a sandy but bassy Latin trap bounce where he can credibly sell the arrogance, but even as he's getting slightly undercut by some of the vocal samples, the song shifts after the siren, and you get a stark snapshot of the guy who can't really love any of them, and the girls who want in regardless for their own reasons. And while it is still an ego trip, the darker edge with some of the spookier synths, they somehow work for me. Again, not my favorite from the album, but it's a solid banger regardless. Worth another shot. Yes, I absolutely know this is cheating. Taylor Swift re-recording All Too Well so it can break all kinds of records as the longest song to hit #1 feels like the sort of move that should automatically disqualify it from this list. But I do have some qualifiers. The first being that I have long had contentious opinions on Red not nearly being as good as so many people claim, even if I have come around to get why All Too Well works over the years. And the other, Well, for as much as I don't really mind Taylor Swift shoving in more verses that simultaneously feel more adult, but in the spirit of the young heartbreak, they feel real, this is also not better than the original in the arrangement or the production. Jack Antonoff occasionally has a bad habit of leaving a lot of empty space in the mix, and a real opportunity was blown in order to flesh out the melody in some of those longer passages, especially as a song of this length can start testing one's patience. They could have done more. But yeah, All Too Well probably deserved to be a proper hit a decade ago, and I don't mind giving it its flowers now, if only for the line, "so casually cruel in the name of being honest," a line that burns hotter every day. I mean, sometimes it is worth remembering, you know? How is it that Lil Nas X probably delivered the pop rock song that lasted the best on the year-end Hot 100 this year? Well, mostly because he nails everything that this sort of wild blast of young love should be, with horny intensity balanced out with the heartbroken yearning for the gay black boy of his dreams. But I do think it's the arrangement that picked this up a notch for me, helped it stick. The sharper, rattling jangle of the acoustic guitar against the more programmed percussion that still sounds pretty good, but never to the point where the song feels stiff or jerky. There is a commitment to melodic groove and actual flow and momentum that even if the end of the hook feels a little bit abrupt, it still remains bouncy and fun. The sort of choppy acoustics of which I really do have a soft spot. And the polish is actually evident here too. Ryan Tedder of all people is a co-writer and producer, and you can kind of hear some of it in the breezy feel of the song, but Lil Nas X adds the anchor point of intensity that Ryan Tedder has rarely ever had. In other words, another great shot of versatility from Lil Nas X. Man, I wish this year allowed him to lean into the better parts of it. He kind of had an off year, but we'll see what happens going forward.
At the Grand Ole Opry or a show in some no-name town, still be doing this if I wasn't doing this.
Whereas on the flip side, sometimes you got someone who is so confident, so set in his own lane, that it picks up resonance almost by sheer force of will. And while you could argue that Luke Combs asserting that yes, he would have done everything the same even if he was not successful, and he's gonna keep on doing it all the same, it can feel a little bit dramatically inert. But you know what? By God, he sells it. I buy it from him. The note-perfect details of playing the dive bars on the road against the windswept rumble of guitars with the slight piano accents, and the grit of Luke Combs just belting it out, it shows the sort of bone-deep commitment to his passion that even if he's making solid, unexceptional country music, he's owning that lane. And you know what? Here's the truth. If the neo-traditional revival hadn't happened in the past couple of years, Luke Combs probably would have had to live that anonymous indie life like so many others do. And while he's thankful as hell that he found success, his path probably wouldn't be anything else. I mean, it's one of the best songs from that last album. It might not be my personal favorite of his, but it is the reason I keep going back to check in on him. Because he keeps, doing this. I get the feeling I unironically like this song way more than I should. Doja Cat is simultaneously mimicking Nicki Minaj on her second verse to the point of literally shouting her out on the outro, and arguably surpassing anything else Nicki put out this year, except maybe Do We Have a Problem, which really deserved to be a proper hit or at least to have a chart run, and then Doja's mimicking Playboy Cardi on the hook, which only keeps proving my point that women do his shtick way better than he does. But more than that, the sheer quirk of Y2K's instrumental plays into the oddball charm that's always been what I've liked the most about Doja Cat. She actually has, a sense of humor with her playful come-ons, but just enough of an edge to know that she will kick the ass of anyone who actually messes around. Hell, she references Ed Sheeran's Shape of You to highlight how playful and disposable the whole situation all is, and it's a lot of fun. Hell, it's a note of wildness that I wish Doja Cat got a chance to flash more often. I'm so happy they pushed this as a late album single. But speaking of Ed Sheeran,
I love it when you do it like that, and when you're close up, give me the shivers. Oh baby, you wanna dance till the sunlight cracks, and when they say the party's over, then we'll bring it right back.
yeah, Yeah, I'm saying it. The critical backlash to Equals was wildly out of proportion. Just because it's aggressively basic and occasionally had some weird lapses in writing and production does not mean it was a bad album or that great craftsmanship can't win out. And Shivers is a goddamn terrific pop song. Part of it, again, that choppy acoustic riff, of which I'll say I'm an easy mark, but also because it's a ridiculously tight dance cut with Fred again on production, giving him a breezy, sandy groove, tight bass line, hand clap, and synth horns that frankly sound way better than they have any right to. And more importantly, outside of that weird lipstick on my guitar line, Ed Sheeran actually knows how to stay on script to nail all that vibe. Yeah, you can call it chintzy, overcompressed, little corny. It is, totally. But Ed Sheeran owns that, it's part of who he is, and that's why it works. It's wildly underrated as a damn good pop song, and the album had a lot more of them than you remember. He deserved better hits. All I'm saying.
Something about the way she kissed me tells me she loves Eastern Tennessee. Yeah, but all I brought back with me was some sand in my boots.
Okay, so I've been gearing up to discuss this one for damn near 2 years, and at different points it's been on my list proper. Hell, in the mid-year of 2021, I called it one of my favorite songs thus far that year. Since then, I've kind of cooled on it. You Can Only Ride a Melody cribbed from Colder Weather by the Zac Brown Band for so long, and Morgan Wallen's antics in 2022 have left me a lot less inclined to be sympathetic, see my worst hit songs of 2022, but that's also why the song can kind of work, because his clumsy hookup doesn't, and he's left stranded with sand in his boots. He does not get the girl. Now granted, between the more organic arrangement, the homespun romance that comes through in the verses, and the very intentional framing to make it clear that you are supposed to feel bad for him, which is why I have been praying for a proper cover version of this song to go viral, and hell, replace it in the collective culture, but we aren't that lucky. I've got a list of songs that I kind of wish would fall in a similar lane. And yes, I know, I'm conscious of what putting this on my list this year even here says, but if anything, it feels like a time capsule of a time where his attempted redemption arc at least seemed to be moving in the right direction. He was trying to make things better, where it seemed like he was learning before, well, everything else happened after this became the sleeper hit. I mean, I can't deny that I still like the song. I think it's well constructed, maybe even great, but I'm also very much aware of everything it was and it's doing, and I'm hoping that everything I said on the last list, I can offset some of my messy feelings about this song now. We'll just have to see. So, okay, I'm not gonna promise we're dodging controversy for the rest of this list, but it's gotta be easier to manage, I can say that. So, number 10. The strange thing is that I've had this song since the late fall of 2020, long before it was pushed as a late album single. And as such, it has cooled a bit on me over damn near 2 years, but it was always my favorite from that project. It was a single, and thus...
I know it ain't all that liberty you should probably leave.
I'm still a little bit surprised that, at least for now, Chris Stapleton remains a singular entry in country, mainstream or indie. Nobody quite has that soulful howl that he does, the workman eye for detail and rock-solid construction, or even just the savvy intelligence to keep bringing in Dave Cobb for producing and his team for engineering, which gives his work a spare but textured richness, all the more potent thanks to Dave Cobb and his team finally learning how to produce and mix the bass lines properly. It leads to a song that feels more mature in the slow burn relationship drama, where they both know that any hookup is bound to rekindle some old feelings, but they can't quite pull away from that moment as the Hammond organ simmers and the guitar rumbles, especially on that deeper solo. Hell, it's one of the reasons I get so goddamn exasperated at all the bro and boyfriend country from Music Row, with all the sanitized sex songs or the immature machismo. This feels grounded, it's real, written by men instead of boys. It makes it feel tangible. Hell, even the Grammys got this right in recognizing this song. Just some excellent country soul that might have slipped off your radar. Go back and dig it up. It's worth it. Number 9. Of course, the flip side to when you have boys writing country songs is that they can bring a different edge to the proceeding. Note I said different, not bad. Although I know for a fact there's going to be some raised eyebrows at me including this track, but you know what, screw it. When a nasty breakup song has some real genuine potency and pathos, I'll take it.
around your finger. One second it's a blessing and the next it's already gone. A broken heart, I'm a walking testimony. My confession is a lesson that I'm pouring out in this song.
But wait, some of you might say, Bailey Zimmerman is just the very obvious ripoff of Morgan Wallen with a vocal tone that might be closer to the Kid Laroi, who didn't seem to get the traction he needed for that debut EP this year, and we haven't seen country music this bitter or sour in the breakup since probably Tyler Farr. And while a lot of that is true, it kind of misses what makes Bailey Zimmerman click for me, arguably closer to what made Juice WRLD or the Kid Laroi work for their audiences in resoundingly petty bitterness that this time actually has the focus to stay on topic, and more importantly, not even bother to frame him as being sympathetic here. That makes him a lot more interesting, with some pretty sharp and detailed patter on both the hook and the verses that doesn't lean too hard on the whole sulky treat you better sentiments, and more on the melodrama of the scene, especially on that hook. And that kind of works for the keening pedal steel, seedy organ, warmer but still minor key guitars, an actual bass line, and live percussion. Honestly, it's got more in common in the melody with something like post-grunge, and with that guitar solo, hell, 20 years ago, Bailey Zimmerman would have been making rock music. Now, I ultimately put this above his other hit, Rockin' a Hard Place, this year because, I gotta say, Exhausted Depression had a lot less firepower than this. It's also a good song, I should add. And you know, while Morgan Wallen is now entrenched, I don't have high hopes that Bailey Zimmerman's gonna get a ton of momentum. But hey, if you want something truly miserable that actually works for what it is, this is it. I hope it's not where it ends. Number 8. So the nostalgia cycle can be a little bit weird to contextualize in the pop charts, especially with TikTok that can throw it completely haywire nowadays. Some folks are highlighting a 90s revival and some of the new disco and neo-traditional country and pop-punk experiments, and every tentative stab into grunge in the indie scene, to say nothing of the ridiculous Puff Daddy-esque sampling binge this year, of which I don't think anyone was asking for. And I would say there's something of a 2000s revival as well, especially in pop rock, but there were other sounds and attitudes that I really liked in the 2000s. I think they could use a fresh coat of paint for that next generation. For example,
do you ever get a little bit tired of life? Like you're not really happy but you don't wanna die. Like you're hanging by a thread but you gotta survive, cause you gotta survive.
it drives me nuts that Beihold is likely going to wind up as another one-hit wonder. Her EP this year was really good, and I'm legit annoyed that I was pretty much the only one who really cared to cover it. But hell, maybe she's just ahead of the curve and resurrecting a brand of piano-driven adult alternative that's probably more Sarah Bareilles than Sheryl Crow, still laden with a lot of irony, but less outright pessimism or nihilism and trying to find something to keep you going. And in this case, it is actually updated with pharmaceuticals for the modern era, with some clattering pianos and crashing sound effects and percussion to highlight just how precarious it all is. Where you're depressed, and you're lonely, and you're trying to plug up your own mental health however you can. I mean, it's no surprise that this kind of became a bit of a sleeper hit with the younger audiences, or Gen Z, who are struggling in the wake of, well, the ongoing past couple of years. More importantly, it nailed why a lot of the forced cheer that came out in 2022 felt so off, felt so wrong to me. Beihold, she sounds like she's got skin in the game. She isn't trying to plaster on a smile, because mental health struggles don't really work like that, even if you might want them to. In other words, it felt way more relatable than it frankly had any right to sound. And you couldn't give her another hit? Any other consistent traction? Hey, radio programmers, if you're all bitching that you're not getting any more hit singles, try taking the ones from right under your goddamn nose. They need a little bit more than quick repairs. In the meantime, this is great, worth many of a revisit. Please give her another hit. Number 7. I have been making year-end lists long enough that I don't really feel any embarrassment for any of my picks, even retrospectively. Yeah, Machine Gun Kelly might have torpedoed his career in 2022, even worse than the last time he did it in 2017, but you know what, that doesn't make Tickets to My Downfall any less great. Yes, I'm still on that hill, but in this case, there is a part of me that feels a little bit sheepish just how much I like, maybe even relate to some of the sentiments in this song despite its very real flaws. But sometimes a love song works better than it has any right to, even in its dumbest of moments.
God makes 5'9" brown eyes and a sundress, lust and McGraw and a small town accent.
I don't know how long Tyler Hubbard's career is going to last away from Florida Georgia Line. At this point, given why they split, I'm personally more relieved that he was the one who seemed to actually get some career traction, but I am happy we got this along the way. The sort of song that leans into a lot of strengths that often go underappreciated for him. There's still a little bit too much polish in some of the vocal mixing, but it is way more organic than Joey Moy often gives Florida Georgia Line, with the warm acoustics and the gentle patter, supplementing some of the neo-traditional touches, and Tyler Hubbard's always had a knack for a good melodic hook. And yes, it is another list-driven song where you get a bunch of country things around girls, and yes, Hubbard, you are right. There is no way your truck made her fall in love. If she was saying that, she was just being nice, even implying it. And you know what? This would be so easy to dismiss as just as dumb as any other bro country song, and yet I don't think I can do that. There's a warmth and a sweetness and a gratitude to this song that feels a bit more lived in and real. It's not smart, but it doesn't need to be. That's not a qualifier for my list, especially with the desperate yearning to not screw it up. It's not as leering as bro country could be, or as sanitized as boyfriend country often is. It's the happy medium. It's pop country. And with a legit fantastic hook, I'm still gonna defend this. Number 6. So here's something that's been undeniably good for country music. Yes, we're still here, and we got a decent bit more coming. They finally understand streaming. And not just Music Row. We can play the label game and load up the playlist. Sometimes you will get those out-of-nowhere viral breakthroughs that can play the independent game, even TikTok as well. And as such, we have what I think might be the most surprising breakthrough of 2022.
If you leave today, I'll just stare out the way. The orange touches all things around.
Look, I've been reviewing Zach Bryan since 2020. I've been aware of him since earlier. I knew his history as a veteran who started making very acoustic, raw, country singer-songwriter music that I often liked but didn't really love. He was a little bit too beholden to his influences like Jason Isbell. His sound was occasionally too spare. But that's me as a critic talking about indie country, which is relatively self-contained in its sphere that the majority of you don't know about, don't follow, or don't care. You don't expect these guys to go viral. So something in the orange getting legit groundswell without tangible Music Row radio support only barely made sense to me. But it kept getting bigger, standing out against even more starkly amidst the Hot 100. Suddenly mainstream critics started talking about Zach Bryan as an artist that you could not ignore, and it was legit thrilling, especially as something in the orange reflects a newfound budget that allows him to go bigger. It sounds haunted and huge. The windswept, dangerous moments in the early morning, with Zach Bryan's rasp and command of symbolism and abstraction, giving the relationship drama some visceral weight that's just primed to rip your guts out. Hell, I can imagine to some, this would be the very easiest possible pick for my top spot. And you know what, don't get me wrong, it was close to getting there, but there are better songs amidst the dozens across American Heartbreak and Summertime Blues that Zach Bryan put out this year. And while this does indeed kick a lot of ass, it wasn't something that always pulled me back. You need to have those intense moments to really draw me in and sink in. Still, while there are breakthroughs I do not see lasting, this one has something, it feels like something has awoken. So prepare yourselves. Number 5. I mean, I called it last year. Shouldn't be surprised.
Go easy on me, baby. I was still a child. Didn't get the chance to.
You know, in retrospect, Adele's 30 has not really seemed to perform on the singles charts like folks might have expected. She got one more tangible hit with Oh My God. It's fine, not something I would ever seek out. But everything else didn't really seem to go anywhere, at least stateside. Maybe it's because Easy On Me cast such a long shadow. Yeah, opening up the album run with a piano ballad, it's a tried and true formula, especially for Adele. But there's just so much more to love here. I love the subtle bass pickups in the low end as the song builds. I love how Adele's command of her heartbreak has evolved as she knows there are bigger and more complicated stakes with her son in the picture. I love the moral ambiguity in the framing is still here in her desperate pleas for forgiveness and trying to find happiness for herself. Again, you could argue it is more of a 2021 song, but it is Billboard's rules. It earned it. And thank God, fantastic track. Number 4. I know for a fact the placement of this track will be the most contentious element on this list, hands down. I mean, it's the most out-of-place song on the Hot 100, even more than Something in the Orange. The sort of hit that doesn't make sense to be charting in this decade, let alone 2022. It got its traction thanks to a placement in a Netflix series, and even seeding some of the ground for crossover viral success. You could not have predicted so many people getting behind it. Even the radio didn't blow a good opportunity, even if it's an older song that outside of the UK never got the proper attention in its time. Now, it's worth highlighting that in its original release in 1985, it did chart on the Hot 100, peaked around number 30. Looking at its run this time, though, they said they had better taste back then. I am almost at a loss for words to talk about Running Up That Hill, A Deal with God. I can talk about Kate Bush and Hounds of Love. I can talk about how that slightly weird cello sound actually came from a synthesizer. That only reinforces the alien, ethereal feel of the song, the mysticism as it picks up the percussive gallop. I can talk about how the track is a stirring plea that would demand men and women see across the wider gender divide, only entrenched in the mid-80s in the UK, and how there's some tangible queer subtext that could have been heard both then and now. I can also highlight that awesome interview from when Kate Bush actually trolled a bewildered music critic and reporter who took the song a little bit too literally, and then Kate Bush said she had never even seen a proper hill. I can also highlight just how resonant it could feel in American pop culture, even in 2022, amidst the whole Stranger Things nostalgia wave and all of Kate Bush's artistic descendants across indie music and even the mainstream pop scene. I can also highlight that while the song kicks all amounts of ass, I don't always return to it, because you need to be in the right mood for Kate Bush, and I'll say it, some of the production here, it's aged in kind of odd ways. I don't always go back to it. It kind of feels a little bit overlong in spots too. I would also feel a little bit strange placing a cult classic of the 1980s in the top 3 of hits for 2022, especially as I personally have Kate Bush songs I would place on an even higher pedestal. Either way, it was a gift of pop this year that nobody saw coming. I wonder what Deal with God was made to bring this to light. Number 3. Alright, next 2 songs. I've already referenced how egregiously obvious sampling in 2022 got a little bit out of hand, but there is something else that's arguably persisted longer in this genre and kind of irritates me more. The very obvious call back to old 90s neo-traditional country songs. I mean, I wasn't against the references so much as I was the laziness that often seemed to underscore these attempts, where it was more about pointing at the past and saying, look, we know this, we have taste too, please give us points, than actually, doing anything new with the reference. But it looks like some folks finally learned their lessons here.
Damn straight, you're killing me, man. You know I've always been your biggest fan. Now I can't even listen, cause I'll get to missing her, then the hurt gets worse.
So again, this could probably count as a 2021 hit, but screw it. Scotty McCreery released it as a very late single, easily the best song on that album. It only started charting properly this year. It counts. And I've been a fan of Scotty McCreery for a while now. Yeah, his material skews kind of safe and neo-traditional, but he's always had a fantastic voice and a sharp eye for picking out songs with rich detail and emotive texture. That's exactly what this is. And like his best ever track, Feel Good Summer Song, it's about reckoning with the hard reality that when you've got that soundtrack for your life, it gets caught up in messy, complicated emotions and situations, and sometimes makes them sting all the harder. In this case, a string of some truly excellent George Strait songs weave together into this breakup narrative. But what I liked the most here was that Scotty McCreery understood that this also had to feel like a George Strait song, neo-traditional in the instrumentation and production, grounded in its detail, plain-spoken but revealing, and he sells the frustration so goddamn well you almost don't realize how surprisingly clever and layered the song is. You could argue that it only got traffic because modern country song referencing the 90s, but it does so in a much better way than, say, Old Dominion does. And with Scotty McCreery now properly independent but still able to leverage his connections to get to the music row, hopefully we see a lot more of him moving like this. Damn straight indeed. Number 2. But speaking of references, if you had told me 8 years ago that this guy would have placed on my list at all, I'd have laughed in your face. Now, 6 years ago, maybe, he had a truly fantastic song that just missed the cutoff for the year-end list in 2016, because that year didn't know what the hell to do with country at all. But when this guy first came out, he was most well known as a frat brother of Luke Bryan, sold merch for Luke Bryan before striking off as a bro country artist, and a C-tier one at that. Nobody could have predicted this. And yet, he stuck around. He outlasted his own genre, and thus...
Singing heads Carolina, tails California. Maybe she'd fall for a boy from South Georgia. She's got the bar in the palm of her hand, and she's a 90s country fan, like I am.
I'm almost at a loss for words. Again, Cole Swindell made one of the best country hits. No, one of the best hits of this year. That shouldn't be possible. Now, for context, he is heavily relying on an interpolation of the mid-90s country classic Heads Carolina, Tails California by Joe DiMessina. A song that I absolutely adore. It's part of my childhood. I could not get around that. But a slightly over-polished remake or cover of that song by Cole Swindell, that would usually piss me off, but he plays it slightly differently. The song is actually set at a karaoke bar, and this girl is belting it out. He's so entranced by the performance that he tries to make a move. We've been there. And it's a coin flip whether or not it even works. Hey, nice callback. Now, one thing I will give Cole Swindell over the past couple of years is that he's remarkably good at playing a nice enough guy, where more often than not, the play for the girl doesn't really work in the end. But he's often still caught up in the magic of the experience that he doesn't take it too deeply to heart. It stings. You need that for the dramatic tension to work, but he works with it because he's an adult. It's ultimately the same principle behind Best Song Ever by One Direction, except Cole Swindell names the song, it's a country classic, and it creates such a big romantic moment, and I was sold. I should also mention that Joe DiMessina did hop on a modern remix of the song with Cole Swindell. It's more of a proper mashup. Sadly, it doesn't really work. They don't have a lot of chemistry. It distorts that thematic callback to memory that could be so special here. But in the meantime, god damn it, the bros that actually stuck around, they're now making good music. What timeline are we even in? But as much as I could possibly gloat about how bro country was never quite as awful as some made it out to be, I was saying that back in 2013, there's a whole swath of hits that I'm more familiar with because I'm Canadian, and say it with me here, Canadian charts. Always better. And in this case, tangibly so. Mostly because the good viral crossovers got momentum. We didn't have as many disposable album bombs wiping away songs before they could get going. And Dawn FM actually got a respectable slate of hits up here. So with that in mind, from The Weeknd, Sacrifice. Yeah, not as good as the obvious influences like Michael Jackson, but that bass groove grew on me. What can you do? From Frank Ocean, Lost.
Lost in the heat of it all. Girl, you know you're lost. Lost in the thrill of it all.
We had Channel Orange era Frank Ocean go viral and chart here. That makes my point for me. From Swedish House Mafia and The Weeknd, Moth to a Flame.
When he sleeps, or does he know the pictures that you keep?
You know, if there was gonna be a song from that Swedish House Mafia comeback project that's actually worth a damn, it is probably this one. And The Weeknd really nails that haunted dance floor vibe. Really effective track. From Farruko, Pepes. This got caught between years in the United States, but thankfully crossed over in time as the Latin pop banger that absolutely wrecks the dance floor. And considering I actually hit a few dance floors this year, I can testify. This kicks ass. From The Weeknd, Out of Time.
But I'm out of time. Say I'm there for you, but I'm out of time.
It's one of the best ballads of The Weeknd's career. I love the low-key music video. The city pop samples are excellent. There's absolutely no excuse why this did not cross over down south. You could have made that happen, just saying. And finally, from Burna Boy, Last Slaps. This was so very nearly a full-on hit in the US. It got caught in the shuffle of album bombs, never quite got enough traction, and that's a shame. Terrific acoustic groove, the multi-tracked hook, Burna Boy nails the emotional drama. You know, it might be the first time a crossover mainstream Afrobeat song really stuck deep for me. Absolutely fantastic. More of this, please. It would be awesome. And now, on to the final pick, number 1. Okay, this is probably the most obvious and predictable my number 1 has ever been since, well, actually 2020. Hell, I telegraphed this last year if you were paying attention. It's already made one of my lists already. But in all due fairness, we did get a full year. It never got old. So let's keep
Smoking out the window. Must have spent 45,000 up in Tiffany's. Oh no! Got a badass kids running around my whole crib like it's Chuck E. Cheese.
I swear, for me, Silk Sonic's a goddamn cheat code. The killer liquid bass line, the glittery keys around the guitar, and the terrific horns, the fantastic chemistry between Anderson .Paak and Bruno Mars that nails the impeccable balance between retro cheese and a modern R&B classic, possibly Bruno Mars's best ever falsetto, the terrific drum work imported from Homer Steinwise of the Dap Kings, and just how the songs seem to instantly click regardless of the season. I had it all year. It never got old. And what I love is that despite how insanely silly this song is, it inspired TikTok memes just with the line, "Not to be dramatic, but I wanna die." Hell, that might be the self-aware callback to Bruno Mars's Grenade that none of us expected, but I think we all deserve. To say nothing of how ridiculously horny some of their frustrations are, given their current paramours, ex-boyfriend and kids and baggage and cheating, and yet by the very end of the hook they still manage to sound cool as they're just smoking and lethargically contemplating what the hell they can possibly do now beyond just ending it and then giving her back to the city. A line that is so both instantly dated but also kind of timeless. And yet what I like the most here is the framing. Silk Sonic, these guys are players, seeing the consequences of their actions, the follow through, and they know it. Which is why they can be kind of regretful that it ends like this while also just cussing her out. A song like this without the proper charm and humor and atmosphere, it becomes melodramatic or insufferable. And Silk Sonic ride that narrow balance. They make it work. Now I'll admit there are points I was not sure how well this would age, which is true about any retro throwback no matter how polished or authentic it'll feel. And Bruno Mars has actually fallen victim to this before, but then I throw on the album. The smile would spread across my face at Bootsy Collins' intro, and pure craftsmanship would win me over time and time again. It's hilariously biting, but strangely gorgeous, so romantic. This was a song for all seasons. My favorite hit song of 2022. I'm fairly certain Silk Sonic were only here for a good time, not a long time, but what a time it was. I'll take it. So yeah, thanks you all for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be extremely grateful. Please go down to the comments, leave me what your list would have been, because I can imagine this might be a little all over the place. Certainly for some, there were some contentious picks here. Beyond that though, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. If you guys want to add albums to my schedule in the new year, just come into my Discord, or support my channel beyond my merch, link down there below. The link to my Patreon is right over there. Don't feel obligated, tough times, I understand, but option is available. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.